And what is up, guys? It's been a long time since I've had a live video. Done a lot of work with MI6 over the past couple of years and haven't done really an individual video in a while. But I've been wanting to do, a little bit of a individual show called Take It to the Bank, where I bring some of my hottest sports betting predictions each week. And, we're getting started a little bit late in the season. A couple of life changes for me. Got married in June, and then also moved to Illinois in February. But I'm excited to be, back on the network, kind of interim coming into different shows that Ben Cruz hosts as well as Isaiah. But that's where we're going to get started. This is, particularly going to be a sports betting specialized stream where I just kind of go over some of my biggest locks of the week for both college football and NFL. Spoiler alert, what I'm going to be calling the Big Wangs locks of the week. Usually I'll have 3 to 5 predictions, try to go perfect, make a very playable parlay for those guys who are into parlays. I'm only going to have locks of the week for NFL. And then, as you can see on the screen and in the description, some of the other games I'm going to have leans for you where I have plays that I'm kind of leaning. So I got the Buckeye geared up and everything. I'm ready to go. Of course, we got the game coming up this week, so excited for that. So first off, week 13 NCAA, we got some really, really big football matchups. We're going to get it started off with Iowa at Nebraska. Nebraska is a team that's lost 3 straight now by, about one possession every single game. Field goal, touchdown to Michigan State, to Wisconsin, and Northwestern as well. So coming into this game 5-6, Nebraska, they're going to be very motivated to win this game and be bowl eligible. However, Iowa, they've shown that they are kings of the Big Ten West and have been able to win most of the recent matchups with Nebraska. Of course, last year, Nebraska taking it away 24-17. This I see as a game that can really go either way. But I think with the way that Nebraska is sliding, even with the added element of wanting to fight for their season and be bowl eligible, get to 6 wins, I'm going to have to lean Iowa plus 2.5 here. At the beginning of the season, I predicted that the Hawkeyes would be a 10-2 football team. I'm going to stick with my prediction. Little shameful that they couldn't have the game against Minnesota where they had the punt return overturned. But ever since then, they've rattled off, 3 or 4 straight wins. So I expect them to continue rolling, having clinched the Big Ten West and a chance at a 10-win season. They'll get it done at Iowa. Give me Iowa plus the points just for extra safety. I'll go over a little bit of why I like taking the points sometimes in these kind of close spreads over money line. Next up, we got the rivalry between the Oregon State Beavers, some might call the real OSU, and Oregon. No one really says that. Oregon is a team that they're the best one-loss team in the nation. It's clear right now. Bo Nix, he threw for 6 touchdowns last week. They've been special. They did really well against USC. They had even an impressive performance at Washington kind of earlier in the year, even though they lost that by a missed field goal, lost by 3 points. There just hasn't been a letdown game for Oregon yet. And I'm not saying I expect this one to be a letdown game. However, I do think Oregon State is coming into this game. They're out of contention for the Pac-12 trophy. They lost a close one against Washington and in a heartbreaker. But you know what they always say, man? You got to bet on a team to bounce back, and good team especially, to bounce back after a disappointing game. I'll take Oregon State plus 13.5 here. I think in a rivalry game, the last one of its form before Oregon moves to the Big Ten, and we'll see what awaits Oregon State, that 13.5 is just a bit too big of a spread in a rivalry game like this. So I will take the Oregon State Beavers to cover 13.5 points. Of course, Oregon could win by 14 and give us a bad beat here, but I'm going to lean with Oregon State and the points. Next, we've got the Iron Bowl, Alabama at Auburn, one of the biggest games of the year. Alabama's got to win here to keep their playoff chances alive. Of course, they are right now currently ranked below Oregon and Texas at number 8, as the third best one-loss team right now in the FBS. Alabama's going to have to keep them things rolling here. But again, in a rivalry game where you've got Auburn at home, and before the embarrassing loss they suffered against New Mexico State, this is important to note. Yes, they lost to Jerry Kill. Shout out to that former Gophers head coach. They lost to them at home 31-10. But before that loss, they beat Arkansas 48-10 on the road. They beat Vanderbilt 31-15, and they beat Mississippi State by 2 possessions at home, 27-13. So they've been relatively holding their own, and not to mention, by the way, a 28-21 loss at the time at home against number 12 Ole Miss. So they've been competitive in all of these SEC matchups. I don't expect that to change against Alabama. And I think Auburn, while they're not necessarily a good team, they're still a bowl eligible and capable team here facing Alabama in a huge Iron Bowl matchup. Things have not gone their way the past couple of years. Last year, they lost by a bit more of a margin, 2021. Of course, we had kind of the 2-point conversion debacle, back and forth with Bryce Young. I think Auburn hangs in tough in this one, keeps it about a 7-point loss. I think Alabama does kind of continue their fortunes of trying to fight for that playoff spot and having to win out and beat Georgia to get into the playoffs. I think Alabama wins, but I'll take Auburn at plus 14.5. If 13.5 is too much for a rivalry game, I think 14.5 is even more of that sentiment because that's over 2 touchdowns difference between two teams that I think could be very evenly matched in this game where Auburn has all the motivation to come back and win at home after a disappointing game against New Mexico State. Then we're rounding out our college football week here right after Black Friday, Saturday, noon kickoff Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Central, 9 a.m. Pacific, Ohio State at Michigan. The game, where my biases lie. I'm obviously going to want to pick the Buckeyes. I want them to do well. This is a team that, entering the season, people had questions about the quarterback. They had questions about the toughness of this team. And I'd say, for the most part, Ohio State has answered most of their questions, most of these questions. The defense is probably by most metrics number 2 in the nation. Kyle McCord has been, maybe not the most consistent quarterback, but he's delivering in the clutch, had great performances late against Wisconsin and Notre Dame and Penn State. When you had to have the drives, he's delivered over and over again. But, in a big game like this, Michigan with the home field advantage and all the scandals surrounding them, I've said this before on different shows. I'm going to say it again here. I think Michigan, they are one of the most motivated teams in the nation. Not that the Buckeyes aren't. The Michigan Wolverines are very motivated right now. They're 11-0 seasons on the line. They can't afford a loss with their resume. If they have one loss, they're probably not going to make it in. And the other thing is with the scandals looming and with some of these players likely heading to the draft after this offseason in college football, they have all the more reason to win this game in their house, in the big house. They also have more continuity offensively, especially at the quarterback position, at the running back position. They brought back all of their key talent defensively as well for the most part. I think they're 2 very evenly matched teams, and you've seen it reflected in the public. Almost 60% of people, they're picking Ohio State to cover the 3.5 points. But I just think that on this day, Michigan's going to be a little bit too much with their defensive pass rush against McCord. He's going to make big throws down the stretch to keep this a close game. But give me the Michigan Wolverines to cover this 3.5-point spread. They're the more experienced team. They're returning more talent. And this is more of their year to win it in the sense that if they don't win it this year, you're going to lose all that talent to the draft. And the sanctions are going to come in for both the recruiting violations that Harbaugh committed during the COVID dead period and also the sign stealing scandal that, I don't have to elaborate too much on. It's very, very infamous. So that rounds out college football. I think, honestly, these 4 games, they can go any way in terms of the spread and in terms of the winner. So I don't have any locks here, especially for the game. That one's a really, really tough one to predict because I just think that Right now, Michigan, Ohio State, they're just so evenly matched. Ohio State's got the advantage on the receiving core. Quarterback, I'll give Michigan a little bit of the advantage, although McCarthy has kind of shown he can't quite be the hero in a big game, time and time again. And then defensive line and defense, I'm going to give a slight edge to Ohio State in the rushing attack. I got to give it to Michigan as well as the coaching right now because Harbaugh's won the past two games against Ryan Day. So that's going to round out a really exciting week of predictions on college football. Next, we'll get into a little bit of NFL. So NFL, I got four locks. We'll call them Big Wang's locks of the week, which we'll go over in a second. And to kind of emphasize it here, I'm picking mostly the Sunday slate here. So I'm not going to include my primetime games here in my picks, although I can go over a little bit of what I think can happen in the earlier games because we got some Black Friday games, we got some Thanksgiving matchups that are going to be exciting. So um, I'll go over that quickly. So we got Green Bay at Detroit very very quickly. Detroit minus 7.5. Again, rivalry games. I don't like taking these big spreads. Green Bay, they had a huge win against the Chargers at home. They're going to be amped up for this game. They know they got to win it to keep their playoff and divisional hopes alive. So I'll take the Lions in another close one. They didn't play the cleanest game against the Chicago Bears, even at home. Obviously, Justin Fields coming back from an injury, indoor passing environment kind of helped easing him in. I think it's going to help Jordan Love as well. So I'll take the Lions to win this game. I'll lean a smidge Green Bay on the plus 7.5. Give me the Lions by 7. Next, we got the Commanders at the Cowboys, minus 10.5 for Dallas. Dallas all year has been able to blow out most of the opponents that have been kind of inferior to them. Obviously, they didn't blow out the Niners or the Eagles, and then they had one slip up against the Cardinals. But for the most part, when they've been the better team, they've been able to put away the game early and often. Still, at the same time, I think that some of the quarterbacks they faced, they've been worse than Sam Howell. And the offenses they've faced have been worse than the Commanders. Another rivalry game happens every Thanksgiving. We got, Commanders, Cowboys, what used to be Redskins, Cowboys. I'll take the Cowboys to win this one in a shootout, something like 38 to 31. Commanders keep it close. Niners at Seahawks. Thanksgiving, what could be better? The best rivalry in the NFL, arguably, and especially in the northwestern part of the United States and the western part for that matter. You got the Seahawks plus 7 at home. Niners have looked a lot better since they took that L against Joe Burrow at home. They blew out the Jaguars. They blew out the Buccaneers. Really took care of business against Baker Mayfield and Trevor Lawrence. I think like the Niners have shown a really great ability to shut down quarterbacks that aren't mobile and kind of able to maneuver within the pocket. They struggle with kind of the more mobile quarterbacks. And I think Geno Smith, we're not completely certain on his status for this game. So we'll have to see the update for that. But again, you got a rivalry game. You're on the road, 12th man in Seattle. This is a dangerous kind of trap game for the Niners because they have a one-game lead on the Seahawks record-wise and in terms of the division. So I'm going to lean the Seahawks plus 7 for that one. And then finally, rounding out the non-Sunday slates before we get into the Sunday slates, we got the Dolphins minus 9.5 at the Jets. It's not going to be Zach Wilson at quarterback for this game. I believe the quarterback for this game, it's not going to be Zach Wilson. It's going to be Tim Boyle starting. So far, Tim Boyle, he's thrown 3 TDs and 9 interceptions on the season and in his career. Really not a prolific QB or even backup for that matter by any stretch of the imagination. He's not going to have any kind of like Dobbs kind of reawakening. Probably not even going to be having a DeVito kind of game, even though the Dolphins are going to be in the elements and they're going to be on the road. Give me the Dolphins to cover here. I think the Dolphins win a tough and physical battle. Let's call it 20-7. Dolphins win by 2 possessions at East Rutherford, New Jersey. So now we get into our Sunday slates. So very quickly, we got the Buccaneers at the Colts. So this is kind of like the Spider-Man meme, I'm pointing at you, you're pointing at me. Gardner Minshew, Baker Mayfield, two quarterbacks who have been serviceable as starters this year, but clearly not franchise quarterbacks in their own right based on how they've played. Both of them have kind of struggled to push the ball down the field at times, even when Mike Evans and Godwin are making some of those prolific receptions for Baker. And on the other side, Michael Pittman for the Colts, a lot of the balls are underthrown. So I'm not again, it's not going to be a very offensive game. And you're kind of seeing this in the NFL this season. It's been more of a defensive game, even against some of the more prolific passers and quarterbacks in the league, like Mahomes and Jalen Hurts and Allen. We've had a lot of physical defensive games. So we're going to have another one here, but give me the Colts because they're at home. Minus 2.5. I'm liking that number. I'm liking the Colts to win by about a field goal, 20-17, 17-14 kind of game. Because I think the Colts, they have the advantage in terms of the momentum. They've won the past two games. And even though they haven't been against the best opponents, being the Panthers and the Patriots, the Colts really need this game to stay alive in the AFC South race. And they got to get as many wins as possible outside of that South. Because right now, there have just been so many hot teams in the South. You've got, the Titans with Will Levis have figured out something offensively. They can win on any given day. Although they haven't been winning games with them, still, you got to look out for them. Texans and CJ Stroud, what a story. They've beaten the Bengals on the road. They beat the Cardinals on the road. They've won their past three games, and they outdueled Joe Burrow in a hostile environment. So, and then you got the Jags. The Jags, other than a huge slip up against the Niners, they've just been competitive in every game so far. They're 7-3. They're about 2 games ahead of the Colts right now. The Colts really need this game to keep alive in the AFC race and the AFC South divisional race. They're going to need as many NFC and non-AFC South wins as possible to stay alive in the division because you're going to have to get wins within the division. And just as importantly, you have to get them outside of the division because it's going to be tough winning games in that division this year. It's going to be one of the toughest, divisions in the NFL this year. So give me the Colts minus 2.5. Very evenly matched teams. Buccaneers, they got the advantage at receiving core, slight advantage at defense. Colts with their run game and Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss, I expect to be able to control the clock. And when it comes down to it, Baker Mayfield, Gardner Minshew, very even quarterback matchup. So in these kind of even matchups, I like to side with the home team. I like to side with the hot hand. The Buccaneers have lost 4 or 5 of their last 6. So we're rolling with the hotter team here. Rams at Cardinals, same sort of storyline here. You got the Cardinals who are 2-9. Really, they're kind of working Kyler Murray in there, seeing like what can we do as a team right now with Kyler Murray? Can he be our franchise guy still? You paid him, record-setting money for the franchise to kind of play Call of Duty for a bit and sit off to the side. But now he's back from injury. He's looked kind of, mediocre-ish. I would say he's not even looked as well as Dobbs, but still easing in. And, rivalry games are going to be tough to predict. I'll be honest with you. The Cardinals, they could absolutely win this game. They were very competitive against the Texans, could have easily had that game. And then I believe they had a win the week before against another team that was quite impressive. Give me 1 second. It was the Atlanta Falcons. So, kind of an impressive home win against a reeling Falcons team. So they're able to win a game here and there. They did beat the Cowboys earlier in the year with Dobbs, different quarterback, any given Sunday, right? But I think Rams right now, currently on Caesars, they're a pick 'em, which means that the spread is literally the money line, meaning like either team you pick, you're going to get about 1-to-1 odds. I think they're just too good of a value here at pick 'em against a tanking Cardinals team. And after the huge win they had against Seattle at home this past weekend, they had a great comeback effort. Of course, Geno was knocked out of the game for a bit, but they're the hotter team. They're coming off a big win. I'm going to go with the Rams. I think they're the better team. I think they're the healthier team. And I think Stafford's finding a little bit of his mojo back. Murray and Stafford both not doing too well this year. Not a big fan of either quarterbacks in these first two matchups I'm predicting. But I'm going to go with the Rams here and not go with the conventional wisdom of siding with the home team in this case. So for the second pick in a row, we're going to side with the road team again. And I think this part, this part of the prediction needs no introduction. You got Joe Burrow. He's been knocked out for the season. Bengals did not handle his wrist injury and knee injuries and all this different stuff well throughout the season. And now, you got a reeling Bengals team. They're at 500 right now. You got a Steelers team that was hot before they lost to the Browns. Is Kenny Pickett the answer? I believe not. I don't think he's like the franchise answer, but I think that he is a game manager that more often than not, he's going to give you a chance to win every single game, provided like you just don't have a team that jumps out to an offensive explosion and destroys the Steelers from the start. If the game is close or within one possession, Pickett and that defense are always going to give you a chance. I don't know if I can say the same thing about the Bengals' backup quarterback. Without Joe Burrow, their receiving core is a little bit banged up throughout the year. Kind of T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase. They've been kind of in and out of the rotation, getting banged up. So I got to go with the Steelers here, -1. I think they have the better defense here. They have the clear quarterback edge now with Burrow gone. They have the better running game. I believe that they've got a winning record for a reason. Yes, you can, attribute some of their wins to luck, but I also think that that with Mike Tomlin's teams, they never stray too far from 500 and from playoff contention. So give me the Steelers -1. I think they're going to be one of those surprise playoff teams. Najee Harris is kind of coming into his own, coming back to form. Jalen Warren's been a really big surprise for them. This is the Steelers team, guys, by the way. They punted on every single possession last week against the Browns. I know the Browns were playing their backup quarterback in DTR. I know that. But every single first half possession they punted besides the last one where they kneeled the clock out. And they still came within 3 points of beating the Browns. Now, if they play a game where they don't punt every single possession in the first half against the Bengals, I think that's going to be enough for them to win this game. If they just play slightly better than the Browns game, they're going to have enough firepower to win this defensively and offensively. I think the Bengals, they've been a mistake-prone football organization this year. I don't know what's been going on with the coaching staff and how they handled the Burrow situation, but ultimately, I'm locking in Steelers -1. I think this is a great value, even for a road team. I know it's a rivalry game. The opponents will know each other well, but Bengals have not done too well against the AFC North with Joe Burrow, and now they're going to be without him. No thanks. I'll fade the Bengals. So next we got the Panthers at the Titans. So we got Will Levis squaring up against Bryce Young, two rookie quarterbacks. Levis had that kind of hot start that he had when he started midseason. He's cooled down a little bit. Defense is figuring him out. But man, Bryce Young, he's just too turnover prone. Several times throughout the year against the Vikings, against the Bears, you're right there. And Bryce Young just commits another stupid turnover. I don't know if it's on coaching. I don't know, like, if it's on personnel, like you need to get him more support at offensive line. But it just seems like every critical juncture this year, when you have had a chance to win, Bryce Young makes another key turnover. Against the Vikings, they were up 14-13, I believe, or they were down 13-14, and they drive within the red zone. Bryce Young fumbles on a third down sack, so doesn't get rid of the ball, takes the sack, and the fumbles recovered all the way for a touchdown. They're up 13-7 actually. So they had a chance to go up like 21-7 or 16-7. Instead, you get a fumble 6. Against the Bears, again, a bunch of turnovers, seals the game. You lose to Tyson Bagent and the Bears at Soldier Field. And then against the Dolphins, you had an early lead in that game, 21-7, ended up losing 42-21. It's just been a very sloppy year for the Panthers, and I feel like that's just been a iteration of all the Panther seasons recently. So Titans favored by less than a touchdown with Will Levis. I think he's the better quarterback. I think they have the better roster and offense here with DeAndre Hopkins and go-to guys like Derrick Henry. I think the Titans, they have more safety blankets on the offensive side. I think they create just enough havoc on the defensive side. Give me the Titans to win this one 17-10 and really shutting out Bryce Young in this matchup between AFC and NFC teams. Next, we get into another rivalry game, and surprise, surprise, I'm going to take another road team here. Saints at Falcons. We don't know Derek Carr's status for the game. I'm not sure if Taylor Heineke, he's recovered for the Falcons, but even with Jameis Winston here, I think the Saints are going to have the roster edge and the quarterback edge. I don't think it needs much further explaining. Defensively, the Saints are one of the most sound teams in the NFL. They've had a bye week to recover now. They had the letdown at Minnesota where they were favored. So I think they're going to bounce back here, take back control of the division, go to 6-5, and take down the Falcons here. They'll do just enough to limit Heineke or Desmond Ridder along with Bijan Robinson. And then we've got the Ravens at the Chargers. Going with another road team here. The Chargers right now, their coaching has been a mess. Justin Herbert, he's been trying to make as many plays as possible to win the game. Even him, he's not been infallible. He's been, overthrowing Keenan Allen here and there in the Cowboys game. In the game the week after that, there've been a couple of times he's overthrown receivers. But for the most part, he hasn't had consistent production from the receiving core. Brandon Staley, I don't know why he's a defensive head coach and he's making, the shot calls on offense sometimes, like going for it on weird fourth down situations that cost you the game, throwing for it on 4th and 1 against the Packers, just all sorts of weird calls in his own territory, throwing when he shouldn't, running when he shouldn't. And then on top of that, you're a defensive-minded head coach that doesn't even have a good defense. Chargers, they rank as one of the worst rush defenses. They got lit up by Jordan Love, of all passers, this past weekend. So normally I would favor good teams to bounce back here, but I think the Chargers in totality, even though they have the talent to compete with just about anyone and to beat teams like the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the Eagles on any given Sunday, I think their coaching makes them a not so good team. I'll take the Ravens -4 in this spot. I think the Chargers struggled a little bit with Jordan Love's mobility and an ability to buy time outside the pocket. They're going to struggle even more with Lamar. And on top of that, the Ravens have a much more potent run game than the Packers this year because you have to account for the quarterback designed run in Lamar along with Gus Edwards and the other people in those backfields. So Ravens -4, like getting them below a touchdown mark. So, by the way, I forgot. The Steelers is going to be a lock pick for me at -1. Didn't mention that earlier. Then we've got the Chiefs at the Raiders. So, again, you got a rivalry game here. Chiefs going to play the Raiders. They had a letdown game against the Eagles. They had many opportunities to seal that game. You could have played better defense in the secondary when you were up 17-7 in the second half. You could have made that catch if you were Valdez-Scantling that he dropped and just frustration slamming the helmet in the tunnel. There's just been something wrong about NFL offenses this year. We've seen it in the Chiefs. We've seen it in the Bills. We've seen it in the Eagles. A lot of teams are just kind of figuring out things a little bit late in the season, and the Chiefs especially. They've been no exception. They've lost Juju Smith-Schuster. They've lost Tyreek Hill. They've lost a lot of weapons over the past couple of years in the receiving core in order to pay some of the guys on the roster like Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, and Mahomes. And you see that costing them in some of these close games. And, you know, even though they'll be motivated to really bounce back and smack these Raiders, this is a Raiders team that now for 3 weeks straight, they've kind of impressed me with their effort. They held the Dolphins at 20 points defensively, so their defense is going to get after Mahomes with Crosby and that pass rush. And they have won 2 out of their last 3. Granted, 2 of the wins were the Jets and the Giants, They came within one possession against the Dolphins on the road, in a spot where they were favored to lose by 2 touchdowns, and they had a chance to win that game. I think right now, like, the Chiefs the Chiefs right now, they're going into the Raiders' home field. They're gonna be motivated, but I think 9.5 is just too big to cover. I don't think they're gonna win by 10 or more in this instance, and we've had a proxy for this game before. Like, usually when the Chiefs play the Raiders, it's usually 1 blowout and then 1 close win for the Chiefs. So I'm gonna use my close win on this matchup particularly because they're on a short week, because the Raiders, they've been playing much better with Antonio Pierce as of late. And also, we've had a spot like this last year too. Last year, I believe the Niners came in to play the Raiders, also their backup quarterback taking over kind of late in the season. They had Jarrett Stidham at that time. The Niners were favored by exactly 9.5 points. They came in to play maybe not the biggest home field advantage for the Raiders, but they came into Vegas to play at Allegiant Stadium, and it was a shootout game. The Raiders lost that game 34-31 in overtime in an absolute classic shootout, kind of battle of the Bay teams formerly, obviously because the Raiders aren't in Oakland anymore, but they managed to cover that spread. So I think the Raiders have shown the capability to compete with some of the best teams in the NFL. And like against the Chiefs, they know them. They're a division rival. They're going to get pressure on Mahomes, and the Chiefs receiving core just continues to struggle to find those answers. Whereas the Raiders, they're actually superior in terms of their receivers. They have some safety blankets in Jacoby Myers, Devontae Adams, and such. So I'll take the Raiders here. I think it's going to be a close game. I wouldn't be shocked if the Raiders won this game, but I'll still take the Chiefs. I'll take the Raiders to lose this one in a close one, 27-20. Then we get into another AFC matchup here. Couple of hot teams here. You got the Browns at the Broncos. The Browns, similar to the Vikings, they've managed to win games in spite of their quarterback and not because of him. They've been able to win with their backup quarterback. Watson out for the season. They've been able to win with Watson, and now they're going to have to pick up another big win here at the Broncos. However, the Broncos, they've won their last 4 games, and at home they've just looked like a different team now under the leadership of Sean Payton. I think Russell Wilson's kind of kicked it into high gear. He's kind of returned back to those Legion of Boom Russell Wilson days where, I don't know if a lot of viewers know this or not, but Russell Wilson in his early Seattle days, he was not the kind of guy to like sling it for like 280 to 320 yards and scramble around and buy time and help the Seahawks drop 30 points on the Niners or 28 points on the Niners. That was not his identity in the past. In the past, he kind of started out more as like a mobile game manager who could carry you late in the game when he needed to. And that's exactly what we saw against the Vikings. He's had a really good campaign this year. He's had really good chemistry with Peyton. And I think we've seen a young Russell Wilson emerge. We may not have seen kind of the MVP or prime Russell Wilson kind of come to life this year, but we have that young Legion of Boom Russell Wilson that does just enough to win you those close games emerge this year. And at home, getting, less than a field goal juice here, I got to take the Broncos. I think there's value in this line. I know they only beat the Vikings on what's going to be a short week now by 1 point, but I also think the Browns, they're not as complete of an offense and team as the Vikings. They have the advantage defensively, but I think offensively, they're not going to be able to put the Broncos secondary and defensive line to the same task that the Vikings did, where you had to defend the quarterback, you had to defend the receiving core and the running back. So in this game, I think I'm going to take the Broncos here. Let's ride the hot hand. They've won the past 4 straight. They've looked impressive against the Chiefs, the Bills, the Vikings, as well as the Packers. So let's continue to ride Broncos country right now. Then we got the Bills at the Eagles. This one, I'm going to lean the Eagles -3. They've got the better roster here. They have had more consistent production from their receivers. Josh Allen, he's having a pretty solid game, but solid campaign this season, but I also think that he's been a little bit turnover prone. Same with Jalen Hurts. So this game is really going to come down to which team can minimize the turnovers. who can minimize the mistakes better, such as not only just turnovers, but also drop passes. And I think overall, I trust the Eagles receivers with Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown a little bit more than I trust that Buffalo Bills offense. I think Josh Allen, especially since Brian Dable left, and now that his offensive coordinator, the person who replaced Dable afterwards, got fired, he's looked a bit frantic at times in some of these big matchups. I expect that to continue, and I know that the Eagles just came off of an emotional road victory. They're going to be traveling all the way to Philadelphia now back home to play another kind of primetime matchup, not necessarily the primetime slot, but this is another big matchup for them where, you got to get some of these wins because you're going to face off against the Cowboys again soon. You're going to face off against the Niners. So to clinch the number one seed, some of these tough games, you're going to have to be able to win them on short weeks or long weeks. And I think this is one of those games where the Eagles, they got to have it to kind of put their foot down in the NFC race. You don't want the Lions catching up. You don't want the Niners catching up. And I think they're going to take advantage and win this game by about 4 points. Give me the Eagles to win 27-23. I think as of late, Hurts has been the less mistake-prone quarterback than Josh Allen. I think that the Buffalo Bills have not quite looked in sync ever since Dable left about 1.5 seasons ago. So in big games, I'm going to have to go with the defending NFC champions over a team that's just kind of been reeling in big time games and prime time games. Give me the Eagles -3, short week. It's gonna be a tough one, but trust the Eagles to kind of put their stamp down on the NFC here. Next, we've got Jags at Texans. So two relatively hot teams here, although the Jags did just lose to the Niners 34-3 a couple weeks ago, came back with a resounding victory over the Titans 34-14. And then you got a Texans team on the other hand that, like I mentioned before, under the kind of leadership of CJ Stroud, you won shootout games against the Buccaneers. It's not an easy win at home. You won on the road at Paul Brown Stadium against a healthy Burrow, 30-27. And then despite all the turnovers, you were able to hang on against the Cardinals. I think one thing that's impressed me is that the Texans defense is kind of getting better week to week now. They're making big stops when they need to. And then on top of that, I think CJ Stroud continues to be one of the emerging stories of the year. One thing that could kind of derail them in this game is that he's been turning the ball over as of late a little bit more, and that could cost them in this game. But I think the other thing is Trevor Lawrence. I kind of think the Jags and the Lions are kind of similar. The Jags are kind of like the Lions of the AFC, where they have a lot of potential and talent. They have a really solid quarterback, but they're not really a world beater right now. You don't feel like they have like a quarterback and a team that's consistent enough to like win all these big games on the road at home. And you've seen them struggle against good opponents, although they had the impressive win against Buffalo. So, in a divisional matchup, I got to side with the home team here, especially when I'm getting points. I'm getting 1.5 points with the Texans. So I'm going to take the Texans to cover that 1.5 point line. And then the last thing, we got the Patriots at the Giants. We don't know who's going to be starting at quarterback, Mm, really, really confusing slate here. Like, is it going to be Mac Jones? Is it going to be Bailey Zappi? Is it going to be Bill Belichick? Or, Josh McDaniels entering the game to quarterback the team? Who the heck is going to be the quarterback for this game? And then you've got Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito off to a hot start last week. Finally had kind of his redeem game, had his breakout game. And the Giants are at home. They're going to be in an outdoor environment. Offense is going to be hard to come by. And the Giants are getting 3 points. Give me the Giants to outright win this game, 17-13, in a defensive battle. So before I kind of go through a little bit more of the primetime matchup, let's go through some of the comments here. So Christy's got the Cowboys winning. Commanders aren't great. She's got the Niners winning and the Dolphins beating the Jets. Love to see it, Christy. You got all the obvious picks here to kind of take the day and win in the NFL. Yes, that's right. Big Wing is back. Thank you, Isaiah. And thank you for tagging some of our fellow MI6 members, Ryan, Martin, and Tree. Could be the time for the Jags to come out of the AFC. I just don't see it, Isaiah. Like, I think the Jags and the Lions are very similar teams where, like, fundamentally, they're very sound. They have good receiving weapons. They have a very solid quarterback that's like they're up there, but they're not like in the elite category yet. Like, I think both Goff and Lawrence, we've seen this in big time games, they don't protect the ball consistently enough. Like, even though the Jags beat the Chargers last year, Trevor Lawrence, he threw 4 interceptions in the first half. Like, you do that against a team like the Bills, or like let's say you even like come to the Super Bowl, like get out of the AFC and get into the Super Bowl, and you do that against the Niners, like you're gonna lose in a blowout. You spot teams like the Niners, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Texans, 4 turnovers in the first half, you're gonzo. So I think the Jags, yeah, they're a solid team, but I don't see them coming out of the AFC. I think both the Jags and the Lions, at least for this season, are fool's gold, where they have solid rosters. They're a pretty good team, but they're not world beaters. Could Ohio State get curb stomped in Ann Arbor? I could see it happening. Michigan, they're returning a lot of talent. Like I mentioned before, they've blown out Ohio State the past 2 years. But I think that Ryan Day is going to have a lot of tricks up his sleeve. This is where you empty the tank. Past 2 years, you haven't been competitive for a full 60 minutes against Michigan. I think that changes in Ann Arbor this weekend. It wouldn't shock me if the Buckeyes pull it out outright. But right now, I've got Michigan 27-21 to win by 6. And then got some mentions about the Niners and Kittle. Yeah, they've been looking great as of late. So let's get into my lock picks of the week. So Big Wayne's locks of the weeks. I got 4 of them. Steelers -1. Quarterback advantage. Burrow's not playing. Bengals already struggle with Burrow against divisional opponents. What are they going to look like without? I got Raiders plus 9.5. Too big of a spread, man. The Raiders, they play the Chiefs close, usually one time a year, and then a blowout the next time in the same year. I'm going with a close game for this one. I think the Chiefs off a short week, yes, they're going to be motivated to get this win for sure. They could have easily had the win against the Eagles, so many missed opportunities. But same for the Raiders against the Dolphins. They took them toe to toe. They were supposed to lose that game by 2 possessions. They did not back down. They blitzed the crap out of Tua, for lack of a better word. Their defense is much improved. I think they take advantage of a weak Chiefs receiving core. They get to Mahomes, they frustrate him throughout the evening, and they lose a close one. But Antonio Pierce, he's won over the locker room there. They love him. Raiders at 9.5. I love them in this spot. Got to lock it down. And then we got the Texans plus 1.5. They're the hotter team. They've won the last 3. Stroud is big time. I don't trust Trevor Lawrence in big games necessarily. He's been turning the ball over in a lot of them. And in a divisional matchup, I think you got to side with the home team, especially when you're getting points. Texans plus 1.5. Even if they manage to lose by 1 in a miracle, you still win the bet. So I'll take the 1.5 points on the Texans. And then finally, let's lock the Giants at plus 3. If you're feeling frisky, take the Giants money line. You can put these 4 picks in a parlay. You could do a teaser. You could just do them individually, 50 each. But I'm feeling very confident at locking Steelers -1, locking the Raiders plus 9.5, Texans plus 1.5, and Giants plus 3. Let's get them. Let's take that to the bank. So let's get in finally to the primetime matchups. Besides, what we had for Black Friday and Thanksgiving. Last one here, we got Chicago at Minnesota. I think this one's not going to take too long for me to predict. Josh Dobbs has been on a heater, even in the loss to the Broncos. This is a hot take, man. I think the past 3 weeks, Josh Dobbs has looked like the better quarterback than Mahomes and Josh Allen, and then like even Trevor Lawrence. Like, he's played better than them against the Broncos. Like, I do not put the Broncos' loss on him. I think there are a lot of mistakes that the running backs made in fumbling the ball. When he fumbled the ball, like, it was a helmet to his chest that should have been called for targeting. They didn't review it. They didn't penalize it. There's a little bit of home cooking there. But, it was a game that really could have gone either way. I think the Vikings are the more talented team. You play that game 10 times on a neutral field, I expect the Vikings to win 6 out of them. I think the Vikings are about, 6-4 advantage better team than the Broncos. They lost by a point. They fought like hell. And hey, this guy here, that's why I told you in close games sometimes, even when you're getting that like close +2.5 spread or +3 spread, I like taking the points because you just never know what could happen. The Vikings, they stopped the 2-point conversion down by one. They had one final drive to be able to take that game, and they couldn't get it done with Dobbs. He needs more experience in the 2-minute drill. But fortunately, I think this Bears game here, with the Vikings having won 5 of their last 6, and the Bears kind of reeling from that Lions tough loss, I think it doesn't really come down to a game-winning drive or a 2-minute drill. It might for the Bears, but not for the Vikings. And you know something else? The Vikings have absolutely owned Justin Fields throughout his NFL career. I think games like this is kind of what puts Fields into the bust territory. Like in close rivalry games where you got to have it moments like they had with the Lions and against the Vikings these past couple of years. What does he do? He holds on the ball too long. He gets sacked. Last matchup, he got sacked and knocked out of the game. Like, obviously, you don't wish injury on nobody, especially a fellow Buckeye. But, I got to be objective here. Like, I think that a lot of the stuff that like he suffers that kind of knocks him down and gets him kind of hobbling and rattled for the game is like he's holding on the ball too long. He's trying to play hero ball. He's trying to make it up all in one play. And that doesn't work against this Brian Flores defensive scheme where they're going to send you zero blitzes. They're going to send bluff blitzes. They're going to send you like different looks that you have to read your progressions throughout. And Fields, he's not the best at reading NFL defenses. A lot of times he's a one-read guy. I think the Vikings, they've just been able to absolutely dominate some of these young quarterbacks. They shut down Bryce Young. They shut down Foles when he was up and coming when he was younger. They shut down Tyson Bagent when they needed to win that game. And they've just looked very impressive against younger quarterbacks, and I expect that to continue. They're right now the Vikings, I believe, are 3-0 or 4-0 against Justin Fields. 2 of those games, or all 3 of those games, have been decided by one possession, and in all of them, Fields has turned the ball over, and he's been completely manhandled by that defensive line. So give me the Vikings to win again here. It's going to be maybe a closer game than we expect, but I don't think it's going to come down to the Vikings offense. I think the Vikings close it out in this game 20-13. Josh Dobbs and the Vikings continue most of their hot run. Let's get back to regular schedule programming at home in Minneapolis. But that's going to wrap it up for me, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys on the next one next week. Let's see what we can do. Last week we went 7-4 against the spread. 2 weeks ago. Last week we went 4-7-1. Suffered some unfortunate close losses in the Steelers game as well as the Chargers-Packers game. But this week I'm feeling confident. Think we could possibly even go 8-3 out of these 11 picks. Realistically, maybe 7-4, 6-5. Definitely going for that winning record. And, we got to get those 4 locks of the week. But this has been Steven with Take It to the Bank from MI6, and have a good night, guys.